I'm joined today with Teajai Travis. He is an artist, an educator, an activist, a community member, and also the Executive Director of Artcite, which you see behind us, which is the longest artist-run center I've seen in this region, right?
Yeah, 40 years old this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I've only been here about a year and a half, so I can't take credit for everything, but we did get to start to drive this thing out of the pandemic. So
yeah. No, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience, which I'd love to chat with you about.
Yeah, I think I've fit about 10 years into a year and a half.
It feels like that, eh?
I think I might be able to retire pretty soon.
Exactly. And then also you let me know that you're the multicultural community storyteller for the city of Windsor.
Yeah, so the city started a poet laureate program, more than 10 years ago now. But this year they started this is the inaugural year for a multicultural storyteller and an Indigenous storyteller.
Okay.
So I'd been selected as the multicultural storyteller, and Teresa Sims has been selected for the Indigenous storyteller.
Okay, and is that like a position for a certain amount of time, or it's like?
The storyteller position is 2 years.
Okay. And then you, in that capacity, you're able to, I guess, just like we were talking about, have an official title, not do anything different, but have an official title. Maybe.
I think it also comes with a few perks that might provide some accessibility to municipal spaces.
Okay.
So we'll see how that works out. I have an idea in my head to do a festival this year called 1000 Nations of Art, and just kind of bring everybody together, artists supporting artists in solidarity, and see if we can, create or continue the creation of a sustainable creative community.
What do you think some of those challenges maybe were during the pandemic, which I'm sure especially for, performing artists, this was an additional challenge?
One of the key things that I learned throughout the pandemic was that, one, I'd been working too hard and too long for too little for a long time, and the opportunity to work from home and to share content via like social media spaces, virtual spaces, helped me to reevaluate the evaluation that I put on my own work, which was really important, because I think I was coming to that realization at the same time as a lot of other artists were coming to that realization. Mm-hmm. So the first couple of weeks, maybe even the first couple of months of the pandemic, like we were, or at least a lot of people were convinced that this is the end of the world. Like this is the apocalypse. We're not coming back from this. We're just kind of trying to stay as safe and healthy for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. After a few months, people started to think about food, bills, money, right. Especially folks who money's a bit more tight, and you kind of have more of a check-to-check sort of pattern. Mm-hmm. And especially for art practitioners, who are working in like an independent practice. Mm-hmm. Performers who relied on venues to perform in. Mm-hmm. But it didn't take a long time for people to turn virtual spaces into those venues. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, as an artist, I think I had more success throughout the couple of years of pandemic than prior to that. And I'd say there's multiple reasons for that, but one of the reasons was I was now in control of the content and how it was going out there. Okay. I was no longer in a position where I was trying to like get gigs from other people. Like I was creating content, I was producing content, and I was able to leverage that content, to build like an economy inside my own practice. And I've noticed that a lot of other artists were doing the same thing.
It's like totally on your own terms.
Totally on your own terms. Which, being an artist, that's kind of the game, anyways. Right. But we were conditioned into a culture of gatekeeping. So you can create a body of work, but you need to be able to show that body of work somewhere. Right. Musicians had they had cracked the code on this some years ago, you know, just by producing work at home, selling it online. You know, that the independent artist thing kind of blew up, you know, some years ago. But as far as like gallery spaces, you think about like theater spaces, producers and thespians are now figuring out ways to produce whole shows in like a virtual space. And a lot of people, you know, were quite successful doing that. But you have to have accessibility to equipment to do this sort of thing, you know, which is also an issue. But it did provide the space for folks who didn't have much to leverage an opportunity to the best of their ability. You know, so the big thing that I learned was that I needed to reevaluate the way that I was valuing myself and my work. And also coming into Artcite, the way that an artist-run center or a gallery or an arts community space in general, how we are communicating and collaborating with artists. Because the pandemic, like one of the challenges for the pandemic was for the brick and mortar spaces.
Right.
Because now you have a space that you can't use, but it still costs you money.
Right.
You know, even with the even with government programs that presented themselves, you know, that was very minimal, you know, but it doesn't really speak to the cost that it takes to maintain a community or an audience, these sorts of things. So I think the brick and mortar spaces, they come to the realization that they're not as pivotal as they thought they were. Traditionally, you went to a space to have an experience, and now the way that we're interpreting space is changing due to circumstance. And I don't think it's something that we are going to be able to like roll the clock back on. You know, there's been a shift in evolution that's happened in the way that we interact with space. I think the major challenges that are going to be experienced are the ones that involve us rotating out of that. You know, as brick and mortar spaces are opening up, as the outdoors, as people are starting to gather outdoors, we start to think about festivals and that sort of thing. You know, do artists want to participate in those spaces anymore? You know, I'm going to test the waters on that by, you know, working to produce 1,000 Nations of art, which is an art festival, but really seeing, you know, where's the engagement? Like, do people want to do that anymore? Do people feel as though they need to do that anymore? I know there's a population of people who grew up in that and will need that, but there's also a generation of people who didn't grow up in that and don't need that, you know, and they're the ones that are like going to push the culture forward. So just having to consider those ideas is part of the challenge, I think, as well. Like one of the things that we realized that became very, very evident throughout the pandemic, and the thing that we can't deny anymore, is what art means to people. You know, when people were locked inside their houses, were isolated, socially distancing, the majority of people were turning to art. Whether it was reading a book, whether it was streaming movies and television, listening to music. I mean,
looking at street art and feeling
looking at street art, or even picking up art as medicine. Like, how many people throughout the pandemic were able to dig back into the imagination that they had to abandon so long ago and start watercolors, start writing poetry? How many people started writing their memoir like throughout this time? You know, to pass the time, but also out of urgency, because we didn't know how much longer we had with all of the stuff that was going on. And watching so many of our friends and so many of our loved ones, you know, pass over, you know, due to illness and such that was related to those circumstances. You know, art became the medicine. And we never had to argue about whether or not art was valuable. Like, we love art. You know, everything around us is a representation of art. The architecture that we're surrounded by, our ability to to identify, physical spaces. Like, art has been all of that stuff, but what's been missing is the artist. We're not thinking about the artist. We're not thinking about the mind that created the streets and the maps that we look at, and the way that we navigate ourselves through, like the third dimension, the third dimensional realm. The food that we eat. The mathematics, like all of these sorts of things that have been isolated from the idea of creative arts and called something else. Now, the artist has to rise. The artist has to stand up, and that means a great deal of artist solidarity to take care of each other while that's happening. But putting a very human face to all of the things that we enjoy every day. Not in a socially distant way or a passive way, but in a very connected way, in a very appreciative way. And I'm hoping, like my fingers are crossed, that we're starting to move into that space. I'm seeing a lot more opportunities for local and community artists, at least. What I'm really hoping is that the government bodies, whether federal or provincial, are providing the appropriate amount of funding so that those funders can continue to help artists create and sustain themselves. We're not even moving into election season now. Like, we're almost at like the election date at this point, right? But what I'm hoping is that there's going to be a strong sense of the art that sustained us throughout the pandemic as medicine, as entertainment. I'm hoping that major investments will be made into those funding bodies so that they can continue to support organizations like Artcite, artists like myself and all of my peers who put in really long hours for not a lot of money, to create a beautiful world for us to live in.
And I think that value needs to be recognized. Like you're saying, I think people are starting to realize and recognize the value that art creates, and that art and the human beings behind the creation of that art. But I think too, it's not. It shouldn't be a situation where artists are having to like run around and juggle how to get this funding or that funding or this grant or that grant. It should just be like, this is a necessity in a modern society to have the arts and culture, and it should be invested in, and it is an investment. So I'd like to really thank you for this conversation today. Yeah,
thanks for coming to Artcite. Thanks for the conversation. All the best on your journey and such, and I am 100% sure we will see you soon.